Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, where we talk to amazing people doing incredible things that lead the charge of generosity. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is not duck, but that's what makes them awesome. Today, our guest is Chris Shields of Lovingly Made Ingredients. From humble beginnings in Wakefield, England, Chris's grandmother taught him the value of a strong work ethic, food as medicine, and caring for our planet. After university, Chris was going to become a doctor, but at the last minute decided that this was not his path. The food industry is what lit his passion and is now leading the way in the plant-based protein industry. Force for good is the mantra of Lovingly Made Ingredients, and that they are. Lovingly Made Ingredients has donated enough product to feed 500,000 people in the First Nations and other people in need. Chris, I was very pleased to meet you, and thank you for everything that you do to better the pond. It is my great pleasure to introduce Chris Shields. So, Chris Shields, I really want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your, what we know is a really crazy, hectic schedule right now, to be a guest on my Better the Pond podcast. It is absolutely fantastic to have you.
Oh, great for having me. Well, thanks for having us here.
Ah, you're very welcome. And as someone in your world would say, we are very pleased to have you.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Yeah, we got to talk. We got to talk in your language. And so, as I said before we got on the call, is we're going to do something completely different after 2 years of having the Pondcast. And because you're such an interesting industry, I thought what we would do is kind of showcase the company and what you do first before we jump into your story. So why don't you tell my guests what Lovingly Made Ingredients is all about and what you do?
Sure. I guess probably the best place to start is at the beginning. So Lovingly Made Ingredients is a wholly owned subsidiary of a company called The Meatless Farm. Originally headquartered in the UK, now shifted to be in Amsterdam. So the Meatless Farm started its roots in 2016 by the founder, Morten Toft Beck. So out of the need and wants of his family, trying to go more plant-based diet and struggling to make the family favorites like a bolognese or a lasagna. Didn't really want to do the whole relearning to cook and veggies and things. His wife set him the challenge of, because someone should be able to create something that fills this gap and makes it taste, and so I don't have to relearn how to cook. So he got out on a mission to do some research. 2 years, I think 150 different iterations, and created what would be the UK's first ground mince product. So that was a lot of work, a lot of effort. So the ground mince in a burger was launched in 2018, and that had great reception. 600 stores with Sainsbury's, food service providers. So he recruited a team then, get that out to market, and by the April in 2019 I joined the business. I was employee 11, already had great success in the UK, and I think by the June of 2019 we were in over 15 countries. So it was a rapid expansion for us, and my role at the time was essentially making sure that we had food safety and quality. So I looked after that part of the business. And what we found at the time was my first challenge was thinking it would be certifications, making sure quality was good was really the supply side. So we had huge amounts of issues getting in the protein that we needed to make the product. It's a textured protein, so made with pea protein, but it's texturized to make it give that chewy texture that mimics meat. So we looked at several different suppliers, constant issues, constant change, and the growth. We were going back to our suppliers every week and saying, oh yeah, thanks, we need to double, which from zero, exponentially growing was not in everybody's interest. They just couldn't keep up with us. So we took the time, did some research, and actually at the time we started the research, I think maybe the High Commission for Canada was listening in, because they just turned up with a report on our desk that was basically, oh hey, have you considered Canada for yellow pea and processing? So I made the journey over here through Montreal and then through Saskatchewan and then over to Alberta about where we should position this, and then spent some time in Europe looking at extrusion technology, which is how we make our product. So essentially, yeah, we decided this was a good idea, something that we could do. So invested the time in the research, and we decided to invest $9 million here in Calgary in extrusion technology that would produce this protein. So
Wow.
back end of 2019, we signed the deal for the equipment, and then we figured out where we were going to put it. So we were tempted by Calgary, perfect location for logistics, ton of research going on into the plant-based space in Canada. And really, I think everybody knows Canadian agriculture is kind of the top of the field. There's a huge amount of land here to grow, and just the amount of protein that's produced from yellow pea, the potential here is absolutely massive. So we decided to set roots here. Took out the lease on the building I'm sat in now in the May 2020. So kind of the middle of the lockdown, I moved out here then. We started construction in June, ran that through to Christmas Eve. We managed to finish everything just in time for Christmas. Had a good break, and then came back and commissioned. So we have now been producing textured plant-based proteins here in Calgary for the last 4 months, and that's just been an incredible ride. We've exported into the UK at least a container a week. So we're looking, 40 tons of material export to the market. And by the end of the year, we're going to be looking around 100 tons of export and 40 tons of internal Canadian and US sales.
All in a matter of 5 years. From an idea that I want to make a bolognese without meat to what you're doing now. That's absolutely an incredible story. So now when it comes to the product, I'm just interested. So looking at, yellow peas and whatnot for a protein base, is it all on an organic level or because then obviously sourcing would be a little bit different than basic, just, mass production off the prairies?
Yeah, I think organic would be, it's kind of the idealistic goal that if we could do that, that would be the dream to do. But there's some challenges we have to think about along the way. We have to look at what's the most sustainable option. So we are essentially a sustainability company. Mm-hmm. So I think that certainly from the Meatless Farm side, and less so from Livingly Made, because we're just here to make ingredients. But part of what our conversation is, we're not anti-meat, we're also not pro-vegan. We kind of sit in that happy medium of there's an opportunity here. We're going from 7 billion people to 10 billion people on the planet, and there's a lot of extra mouths to feed. So just positioning in the middle there, there's still a ton of room to grow. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure, and that's why I was asking that question, because just that massive growth. So just briefly, Chris, can you sort of share with me what the dream is? Like how big do you see this going? I mean, it's been such a shift in the marketplace from meat products, right, to vegan products, the meatless burgers and those kind of things. I mean, that popped up, and it's huge. So where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about this morning. So I think the general consensus across kind of the global financial institutions, as well as some of the fields, is that the alternative meat, as we probably call it, will account for about 10 to 15% of the global meat market. The global meat market is $1.4 trillion. So there is still a very, very large potential there. And I think we're sat around 25 billion currently. Mm-hmm. This facility here alone, our 10-year target from one facility is it's going to land between $100 to $200 million in sales.
Wow.
And then we need, obviously, our farmers here in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and we need fractionation processing here. So the just from a couple of small players in this field, we'd be talking over $500 million just in that simple process. And that's not even considering the downstream side.
Right. Isn't that incredible, though? I mean, you think, 10 years ago, there really wasn't much of a market there. And, right, and look at it now. And I mean, 10 years is not, even 5 years is short, but even 10 years wasn't a market. And you think of how that shifted in such a short span of time, and when what people are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, for me in the UK, we looked when I joined the Meatless Farm, there was next to nothing on the shelf. The Meatless Farm was the brand that sat there. And now we have whole aisle sections in supermarkets that is dedicated to plant-based. I think 40% of all product launches in the UK are now plant-based. The growth is phenomenal across, particularly that market. I mean, we looked to the US at the time as the fastest growing, but I think the UK is now the leading kind of space for this. And the American market and the Canadian market is still just emerging.
Right. I was going to say is that the UK is obviously leading the way, and who's next, and is that what do you think? What's your thoughts on Canada, US, or do you sort of combine that into one as far as the sort of North America?
Yeah, I think as the North American market's a pretty good way to see. There's probably more of an east-west kind of divide that's more prevalent than the north-south piece, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. That would make sense. That's fantastic. And again, I just wanted to sort of be able to tell the listeners like what is that you do, because we want to showcase that product because it is such a wonderful alternative for people who choose not to eat meat products, right? But yet still get that flavor, texture, that experience. And so that is you're providing a real hole in a market that didn't exist before. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think the key for us is certainly we're not targeting the non-meat eater. It's that really the flexitarian market. So I mean, I still enjoy meat. I generally pick higher quality meat, and I would eat plant-based 2-3 times a week. So that might be a meatless burger one day, and it might be a bolognese with even just textured protein that we produce here can be used directly in a dish. Really easy to use. So there's opportunities in that space. It's cheaper to do. It's healthier in some instances. So having that variety in the diet, I think, really helps. And I mean, we pack our textured protein that comes straight off the factory here is between 65 to 80% protein. So when you put that into a dish, you get a really good punch of protein for the bang for buck.
Yeah, and even just for myself personally, I have not had a meatless burger, so now I'm going to be driven to do so. But I will say, I mean, of course, I love meat and I love higher quality meats as well. But I will say honestly that I would like to have this choice as well, because I think it is a bit of a healthier choice over the long term. In order to be able to, have a healthier diet, healthier lifestyle based upon the product that you're doing. So I'm going to take you up on that.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, I always attribute it back to when I was a kid and, we didn't eat meat every day. And we suddenly ended up in a situation where we do eat meat every day. Whereas, typically in the UK, it's fish on a Friday, you'd have a roast dinner on a Sunday.
Yep.
And then you'd probably have a soup and a couple of different vegetarian meals in the week. It wasn't something you thought about. It was just food was more seasonal. These were the things that you had. So we're really just creating the balance back again, I think, a little bit.
And I think that, in just being from Saskatchewan, right? I mean, or in Western Canada, I mean, what does everybody do? I mean, it is steak and potatoes, in whatever form that steak is, whether it be roast or steak or pork chops or whatever, bacon and eggs for breakfast. I mean, it has been there since the dawn of time, and that's what everyone does. So again, we're seeing as generations come in to wanting a different type of product. And you again saying that you can actually service that, because it would be a big change for a lot of people, especially in Western Canada, to be able to take that on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. There's a first. We got the story of the company before we got the story of you. And this is where we're going to jump into the story of you, Chris, because I want to know, who you are, what you're doing to better the pond. So let's just jump both feet right into the pond. So I think this is going to be I think you're going to have a fascinating backstory, Chris. I want to know what got you from being a gosling, so you're young, right? Your humble beginnings, right, in the UK, to leaving the nest to where you are today. Chris, I want to know your backstory.
All right. How far back do you want me to go?
I want you right to the beginning.
All right. Well, I mean, so I'm now 34. So probably still fairly young in this space, I think, and certainly for the role. I mean, it's been a heck of a roller coaster ride, certainly for the last 2 years, but probably the last 7. So I finished university. I was a graduate of biomedical science and human biology.
I'm taking you way back. Let's go right back when you were a gosling, Chris. Where did you start from? I want your humble beginnings.
Okay. So I was born in England, in a town called Wakefield. So kind of right center of Britain, really.
Okay.
By the time I was 3 years old, I was living in Florida. So my family moved out to Florida. We lived there between I was 3 and 6. came back to the UK with quite the accent, which I lost around 11, which I got funny looks at school quite a lot.
So
Yeah.
I have to catch you off there. What got you from the center of England to Florida? Like, how connect the dots for me there? That's quite a large leap over the pond.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's probably kind of rooted in my family history. So we've been known to move around. So my parents were married in South Africa. They met in England, but they were married in South Africa. They lived in South Africa for a number of years. My dad lived in Nigeria too. So yeah, my grandmother did a lot of work. She actually set up did a lot of work in Nigeria training midwives. She set up a cancer hospital in the UK and a craftland. So she's been around. She kind of led the way in terms of breaking new ground and visiting new places. So she had the family out in South Africa, and then to my auntie, she actually built a boat with her husband. They sailed their family from South Africa over to South America.
Hold on. She built a boat.
Yes, yeah.
With her own two hands.
Yep, her and her husband and a couple of other families were doing the same. So they were building their own yachts to sail basically to South America.
Wow, that's a fascinating story.
Yeah, so I think they kind of led the way in terms of jumping the pond. They sailed to South America, all the way up the coast, and eventually settled in Florida. So when my parents got the opportunity, they went out and joined them and worked out there for a few years.
And what did your dad do?
He was actually a flight instructor, so he was teaching people to fly.
In the military, or just as
No.
just regular flight?
Yeah.
And what about your mother?
At the time, I think because of working kind of situations and visa status and stuff, she worked for some higher level, kind of like as a cleaning service. Which I think is a good typical immigration story, I think, for Florida.
Absolutely. And you have two other siblings?
Yeah, two sisters. They're still in England. So my family all moved back to the UK. My parents have since moved back to Florida. My mum's now a palliative care nurse over there, so she does end of life care.
So she kind of followed in a little bit in the grandmother's footsteps of healthcare.
Yeah.
And what do your sisters do?
My sister, one of my sisters, she works in the NHS, the National Health Service. So she leads one of the lab teams there around histology and things. So a lot of the testing requirements that comes through for blood services and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And the other one?
She has just had her second child, so she's currently getting back into work soon, I think.
She's being a mom.
Yeah, she's been a mom.
There you go. Perfect. So you went back to England, and how old were you then? You say 11?
6. 6 when I went back. Yeah.
Okay. And then so tell me about that story from being 6 on.
Yeah, so I mean 6 to 18 was school, typical childhood in the Wakefield Leeds area. Yeah, nothing too exciting probably between that time and then on to university.
So when you were 15, 16, 17, 18, those teenage years, did you have a job?
I did when I was 16, worked in a restaurant. So, a waiter, which was actually pretty lucrative at 16.
I bet you it was. And how long did you stick that out for?
Just for a year or so. I mean, I pretty much worked from 16 though. So I've always made sure I've been able to kind of pay my way as I go and paid myself through university.
So did you fund yourself for university?
With student loan programs, but living costs and everything, through work. So I worked like a 40-hour week as well as doing schooling.
So there is no lack of work ethic in your family.
No. Just get stuck to it.
Yeah. So where did you go to university?
It was Leeds Metropolitan University.
And what did you take there?
Biomedical science with human biology. So I intended to go into being a doctor that was my primary goal.
Okay. And how did that change? That's fascinating to go. When you go into medicine, that's a huge commitment, and you have sort of there's usually a straight line. My sister's a physician, so when she got out of high school and she went to university, that was it. There was nothing else. She was going into medicine, and she made her way through that way. So what was that changed your thought process along the way?
It was meeting my wife probably, but so I mean, we met as I was going through and decided to apply to medical school then. So I took a bit of a break. I worked in France for a winter season, did a ski season out there, which was when my love of the mountains really started. Came back and met her and applied for medical school. So I got through to final applications and then I pulled out because I took a job in the food industry and completely fell in love with the food industry. Saw the opportunities and that really, the root of everything that we do and the biggest change we can make is within food. So with the right food choices, you can essentially heal people or at least prevent some disease. So I could go and treat the singular person, or I could go and work on something that could actually have a broader application.
So do you remember that moment in time when you were going to, you were ready to apply, you were to do the final application, and you just said, no, I'm not doing it? Do you remember that moment in time?
Yeah. I think it was, I can't remember the year now, but I know it was the 18th of January. So yeah, I'd gone through the 9-hour exam. I'd gone through the interviews. I'd had the acceptance, and I'd got through to the final stage. And I'd taken a job in the food industry to pay ready to move because it was going to be in London, obviously very expensive place to live. Mm-hmm. So took and started that process, and then looked at the cost and looked at how the impact I could have here and the journey that was going to be. It, like you say, it's a tough linear journey. Or could I do something here instead, which also allows me to use a bit of the business side that I've picked up along the way.
Well, it's interesting you say that because you're taking, medicine, right, and your education that you had, and you're still really kind of doing medicine, but just in a different way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Starting right back at the root. I think there was a saying I came across once that always kind of resonated with me. It was you can pay the doctors a lot of money, but really the farmers are the guys that make sure that we're healthy. This is fixing disease. This is preventing it.
Right. Yeah. And have you always kind of looked at things from a prevention side versus a reactive side? That's just how you've thought about things?
Yeah, that, and one of the phrases I really hate is "we've always done it that way." So I'm a big proponent of challenging the status quo and what we currently do. We should always be looking at how we can better, but you have to look underneath it as well. So you can make a change that you think is for the good and maybe not really consider the consequences of that. So when I looked at the plant-based industry, for example, is it the right change to do? Because, there's a lot around, is it the right sustainable solution? Is it going to be worse for the planet? And I think those are the things you've got to challenge out with any decision and make sure you've got the right reason to do it. Kind of like they talk about with, the genome project, cloning. Is it something we should be doing?
Yeah. Well, let's just not go down that road, shall we?
Yeah.
I've been in medicine for 27 years. And it's so fascinating to me how there's so many people who, when, they end up seeing me, but there was not a lot of prevention along the way, but it was until something, one of my favorite sayings is, change before you have to. And there wasn't a lot of change before, but it was after the fact that something occurred. Now I have to do something about it because there's really no choice. And it's one of those things I could never kind of wrap my head around. So why don't we do something why don't we try to prevent, right, rather than try to resolve after the fact?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you got in the food industry, and you obviously, so you've left medicine. It's now in your rearview mirror. And so bring me up to speed from there.
Yeah, so I was actually a quality assurance role. I don't know why I got recruited. I didn't feel like I was deserving of the position at the time. And I think probably from that, I always had the hunger to make sure that I was doing the best that I could in the role. So I spent tons of time researching. I had a great mentor at the time, and I think he saw just a potential opportunity. So he invested a lot in me in terms of education in the food industry. So I went through all the certification programs in a very short space of time. I was the only quality person on a site. So it was a new site. It was a new technology to the business. So it was challenging. But I think from that allowed me to grow really quickly. And I think essentially I stayed with that business for 5 years, and I was promoted probably every 6 months to a new position. So I moved from different sites. So I moved within the country, which 2 hours up north was a big change when you talk about England. That's, you're all the way to the top of it by then. So I moved up there and ran a different division, eventually working up to management positions with those guys, and then moved on to chocolate manufacturing. So they did, the previous company was dried ambient snacks, soup meals, noodle mixtures. So we actually bought a noodle line from China, brought it to England, and made noodles within the country, which was the first of its kind. Really exciting process. Took it from 20 ingredients to 3. But yeah, then I moved on to chocolate for a little while, which didn't really sit as well with me. I thought it'd be an exciting opportunity, but selling chocolate primarily, the focus market was the children's market of chocolate as well. And that just, I lasted 6 months there. I was like, this doesn't feel right. And then I met Richard, who was the MD of the Meatless Farm at the time. Had a conversation with him, and then moved into plant-based, which haven't looked back since. So 2 years now.
Yeah. So what was it about that conversation? I'm really curious. I mean, obviously you wanted out of chocolate, and I can respect that, even though it is chocolate.
Yeah. My daughter wasn't happy.
But you're right. Now you don't no longer get free samples. You got to buy it. But what was it about that conversation, Chris, that captured you, that you said, this is where I want to be?
Well, I mean, at the time, so that'd be 2019, 2 very young kids, 4 and 2 years old, or 3 and 2. And over the kind of the course of the last 2-3 years, we'd gone through, me and my wife, dietary changes of, we'd started working out more, and we'd gone more protein, and we realized we were eating a lot of meat, and we actually weren't feeling too good from it. So we started doing a reduction, started to feel better. And a lot for me was around, there's a lot going on in the global climate. Things are changing. How do we protect the future for our kids? And if you look at the statistics, things don't stack up well if we carry on the way we're going. So some change needs to be made. The population is growing by 3 billion within the next 10 years. That's a scary amount of growth when we're already struggling today. So how do I do something to make sure that I leave something behind for the kids? So it was about sustainability for me. It was mixing 2 of my passions, food and sustainability, and getting to do that in one bracket was a great thing, because when, in chocolate, there's not much I can do to change. We've got sustainably sourced cocoa, but ultimately, maybe to most people's upset, the cocoa growing region and the coffee regions are in decline. So we will eventually run out of coffee and chocolate. Yeah, we don't talk about that one.
We don't talk about that one. Chocolate I can do without. Coffee, I'm not sure how well I'll last. So
yeah, me too.
don't create some big push that for everybody to go out and buy coffee. So do you still have a love of food to this day?
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah. Are you the one who cooks in the house, or does your wife do it? Do you do it together, or what's?
A bit of both. We kind of mix and match as we need to do. I do always enjoy my dishes are the ones that are normally thrown with all the leftover ingredients and see what we can make out of it, which are normally really good, but then I never have any idea how I did it.
Yeah, that's the same with me. So never ask me to replicate anything.
Yeah, I can't do that.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, so, whereas my wife comes up with, she creates, because our son has 9 food allergies, so she's had to learn how to recook a lot. And she makes some of the best sort of plant-based snacks and things, and the energy balls and stuff like that. Just fantastic stuff for the kids.
And is that something that you would even look to take to market down the road? I mean, with kids' nutrition. I mean, which is so vitally important.
Yeah. So I mean, a big concern for us is, really our son, with the allergy he has, takes out a lot of the alternative meat products, because even peas, he's allergic to peas, so he can't actually eat our product. So we've always looked at different inclusions of how we can do things, and actually hemp protein is one of the best things for him. So he eats good grade beef, he'll have good grade chicken, and then hemp protein and a lot of these snacks and things to give him the protein boost. And I think there's huge opportunity there in blended proteins and these different mixes. So
isn't it interesting? Necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so out of your son having these allergies, right, allows you the opportunity to create, ideas for new products for
Yeah.
humanity.
Yeah. And it's a big push for me. I mean, if we're trying to replicate meat, we need to do it with a zero allergen focus. So how can we reduce the amount of, because it is, you're going to exclude some part of the market. And really, if you're trying to get close to that, you should be trying to avoid that. There are some instances where the technology just doesn't work, but those are the things that we challenge.
Right. I mean, there's the challenge there, right? So if you don't have the challenge, then why would you come up with something new?
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. All right. So moving right along. So I believe, Chris, that we're all odd ducks. I believe that we're all misfits. So can you tell me about a time in your life, positive or negative, where you didn't fit in, where you had to do something differently that made you you? It's kind of like, what is your superpower?
I'd say that's probably more often than not, actually, which has probably led me to where I am today. I certainly think I think differently on a lot of things, but like you say, we're all odd ducks. So probably a part missing in that story that we talked about before I went off to my work in France. My grandmother, who set up the hospital, she actually owned a place in Scotland. She had a small acreage there. She had 5 acres. So I used to travel up there, cut the grass for her, come back. So that was after work on a Friday, drive up and do that, which was a 7-hour drive.
Oh.
But yeah, she had a fantastic place there, and I saw huge potential, which she knew she couldn't capitalize on. She was 85, running a business up there at the time. So I wanted to start a small holding there. So I wanted to breed alpacas there. Everyone thought I was insane. Probably was. That never happened. But ultimately, that's pretty much led to where I am today. So still always had that passion to have a small plot of land to be able to do something. And we've just bought and moved into an acreage here in Calgary. So fully invested into the way of life here now.
So you're loving the acreage life back then, and you're still obviously doing it now.
Yeah. So I've always had the goal to get to owning just a small acreage. So we have 6 acres here, which is pretty much the same size as the one she had. The weather's a little bit different. It rains a lot less.
Yes.
It rains a lot less.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me though about, like, you wanted to raise alpacas, which is there's something that doesn't happen every day. So obviously that tells me that you again, you think differently. So, but what happened that you had the dream of raising alpacas, but it did not come to fruition?
Yeah, I mean, at the time I was, like 19, so money was not on my side at that point, and alpacas are expensive. So I wanted to do breeding programs, mostly seeing the opportunity. There's a growth in the alpaca production for fiber. So I was looking at I wanted to take on a small herd and produce and sell the breeding stock, essentially. I mean, in the UK, they were £20,000 for a good breeding stock. So you can make a bit of money from doing that there.
And so that was at 19. So at 19, you already had that entrepreneurial mindset to do things your way.
Yeah. Never quite knowing how to get to the next step. And I think that was a good part about the Meatless Farm, being given the space to do it and the opportunity. So I proposed the idea for Canada and was, go do it. So it was very different to have that kind of backing.
Right. So so you weren't in it alone, right? You had, something to back up, but you could still fulfill a dream to make a difference. So Chris, can you tell me about a time in your life when someone did something for you that left an impact, that left a mark in your life?
Again, probably quite a few of those, and I think that's one of the key things and what I want to make sure that I do in life as well. So I mean, I think I've mentioned before, my grandmother was she had that entrepreneurial mind, always thinking about what she could do. I mean, to the day she died at 88, she was, still working on different projects. She was running like a camping and caravan business on that acreage in Scotland. So she would go up there for 6 months through the summer. She'd be mucking out the toilet. She'd be doing everything that she could on the land. So she was always a big supporter, always a big help, and really a good visionary of how to do well in the world. Certainly setting up the cancer hospital and teaching midwives in Nigeria, I think really led to that. Doing good and giving back was a big part of that. And then I think when I got into the food industry, having the support of my technical director at the time, just complete confidence and faith and constant support to actually grow very quick. I went from a QA position to sitting here as a president of a business within 7 years. So it's been one heck of a ride, and I definitely couldn't have done it without those.
So going back to this really fascinates me. Going back to your grandmother, I mean, you know, when I listen to you speak, I mean, again, when I said it earlier, there is no shortage of work ethic in your family, obviously, and not just work for the sake of work, but work to make a difference. That seems very, very clear. But do you ever remember it? I mean, you know, what I'm hearing from you is you watched your grandmother do those things. But did your grandmother ever say anything to you or talk to you that really made you want to, you know, do the things that you're doing today? Did anything land from way back then that is still playing itself out to what you're doing today?
Probably, yeah. I mean, she was always pushing me. She was the one who wanted me to be a doctor. And if I wasn't going to be a doctor, it was do something outside. um, Being out in the fresh air is always something good to do. So, and she was always a big proponent of, and apologies for the language, but it was shit in, shit out was her phrase for food. So you eat bad quality food, you produce bad results.
Right.
She even had a fun theory in terms of the shape of food. So without knowing, and I think there's a lot of stuff come out recently, you know, a walnut looks like a brain. It's good for brain health. Kidney beans and things, good for the kidneys, etc. So she was always had a way with food, and certainly, you know, she had quite an aggressive a blood disorder that eventually was what led to the end of her life. But she believed she could beat it just by food. So she always believed any disease could be beaten with food.
Interesting. And but yet she lived, what did you say, 85?
88.
88. So
yeah.
Still, it's a pretty long, and especially in her generation.
Yeah.
Right, under those conditions. It is fascinating, actually, because I learned of that recently, probably within the last year, about that same thing. Like, yeah, walnuts, or the shape of food is actually what will help in the human body, which is really fascinating.
Yeah. I always thought it was just funny, but then I saw something a few years later, and I was like, oh my God, she was right.
Yeah, look at that. So isn't that fascinating? So she wasn't a scientist. She wasn't, right? She just looked at the land. She looked at food. Right, and she figured it out on her own.
Yep.
So where was your grandfather in all this? Like you talk about your grandmother. I'm fascinated to see these linkages. So was she on her own at the time on the farm, or?
Yeah. He died when I was 11 years old. So he was an interesting character. He was an engineer. He built some of the artillery guns and things during the Second World War. And actually went out to set up plants in Nigeria and South Africa. So she dragged him along and made sure he went out and got those jobs. I think she actually went to his interview with him and got him the job. So yeah, she was certainly the power force, and he was the thinking engineer. Yeah.
So she was the driver, and he was a driver and doer, and he was the doer.
Yeah. Get it done.
Get it exactly. That's fascinating. You must have very fond memories of your grandmother. I mean, it's really obviously laid the fabric down, you know, for obviously for your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so because here's the meat and potatoes of the Better the Pond podcast. So what are you doing presently right now to better the pond? So yeah, it can be you personally, or the organization of Lovingly Made Ingredients. So what are you doing to better the pond? And my bigger question is why?
So I mean, as an organization right now, we've only been operational for 4 months. One of the first things we did as we started up was how can we, and this is kind of a tagline, we're going through an identity. We've got to figure ourselves out as we go and as we build the team. So I've kind of stuck to one core value for us to live by, and it's a force for good. That's kind of just, if we have that in the back of our minds on any decision we make the right decision. And then we can work out some of the more fun values as we go and who we are. But I think if we start at that really core value, we make good decisions. So we've donated some of our product, and because of the nature of the product, that impact is huge. So we could donate 1,000 burgers and feed 1,000 people, whereas we can donate 1,000 kilos of protein and feed 50,000 people. So we actually made a donation which went to 500,000 meals to the Gleaners Association. So that's gone to families in need, and I believe some orphanages was what the feedback that we got. So that's an ongoing piece that we want to do. So that's really the start of kind of things, and we see that really is a minimum. We've got more work to do, so we want to make sure we donate. We want to engage the community, including the First Nations community, so we can make sure that we're talking to stewards of the land as well as to farmers as well. So recently been out, and most of my summer will now be spent on the farms talking to farmers and how we can look to develop the contracts. And part of that contract is how do we build sustainability into those? So I don't want to just buy pea protein. I don't just want to buy peas. I want to have relationships with the farmers so that we can put good into the ground and get good out. So what we want to look at is supporting them, making sure we get security for them. So sustainability to me is environmental and economical. So we can't be environmentally sustainable if the economics don't work out. Eventually it will fall down and we'll go back to the old way. So how do we do both of those together is absolutely key. And it has to start with farm. So we can make sure that we look after the farmer, we can develop that. And part of that contract is going to be, as we stand today, we're looking at about 5% of every acre that we contract would be rewilded. So giving back to the land and then investing further back. So we start with the farm, but we've actually gone a little bit further back and started to invest. We've invested in seed breeding using some AI technology. So we're hoping to increase the protein content that we can put into the pea. So we need less land, but we'll pay the premium on top. So the farmer ultimately nets out the same. We just need to use less of the land and we can put back to the environment too. So creating that good balance is key. I mean, we got 10 billion mouths to feed soon. We need to make the best use of the smallest amount of land. And we also have to make sure that we leave something back, you know, losing species left, right, and center, and kind of the next level of extinction. I'd like my kids and grandkids to be able to still see bears and things in the wild and it not just be another piece of farmland. So we have to do good there, I think, is really key to that.
You know, what's really interesting is two things that you said that are really impactful, Chris, to me. One is, I mean, obviously giving back, and it's a very, you know, what I hear it, it's so different because it's a two-way street, right? You're saying you're not just taking from the farmer and saying, okay, well, we're going to take their product and sell it, right?
Yeah.
You're saying we're going to get from the farmer, but in turn, we're going to support them back. Because it's a two-way street, which is quite a different model from the usual, well, the farmer produces and sells, done, right? Wait for the next year. The interesting thing too is I was just having conversations just about, but not even last month. So do you know Saskatchewan very well at all?
I know it a little bit, probably not enough as I should.
Okay, no, that's fine. So out in so Yorkton, Esterhazy, so it's sort of northeast of where I'm from, Regina. But anyway, we're just having this conversation about a lot of the farmers are basically clearing land. So they're taking the trees out, they're taking, you know, they're clearing all this out so they can get more actual farmland. But when you start taking that out, what happens to all that? What happens to the habitat? Right.
Yep.
And so the driver is, well, I need more land because I have to be able to plant more seed. I have to produce more in order to survive. And you're saying, let's use less land and let's keep the wild.
Yeah.
I mean, there's such a dichotomy there. Right.
Yeah. So,
and so I think that's really, in my opinion, anyway, that is such an important message to get across to the farmers, right? To that, hey, we can use less land but produce more, and you still have the same net, right? Instead of the thought process of bigger is better, bigger is better, bigger is better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So it drives the value back up the supply chain. So I think there's a bit of an imbalance of where the value sits. If we can create that better balance, the farmer is the most important part in the whole piece for me. And yeah, if we've got that economic stability for them, it doesn't need to be more is better. We can get more out of less, which should be the key thing. And we're doing a trial with a company at the moment. So they have a co-crop plant of mustard and pea. So we'll see a slightly lower pea yield, but we'll also have a mustard yield. So we should, there's less inputs needed on the land, so the cost is lower. it's better not to put those pesticides and herbicides on there if we can, because you got the mustard producing the biofumigant. So provided we see good results from that, we're actually having two crops produced on the same land, maybe 3/4 of each. So ultimately there's a higher yield per acre. And that's the piece that we want to look at rather than just a monocrop. How do these dual crop systems work? How can we make sure we do this and then the soil grade stays? Because we can do more, faster, better, bigger, but the soil will just degrade and then you can produce nothing and you got to go clear more land and this is dead. So how do we stop the erosion? How do we stop taking more land and go back to less?
Well, I even look at talk about the clearing land, right, to create more surface area of for yield. But yeah, what happens to the erosion? What happens, to all that? I mean, that eventually that is not sustainable. That is not sustainable farming.
Yeah, end up with another dust bowl.
With another dust bowl. Yeah, exactly. So when you look at this, Chris, number one, I think it's fascinating what you're trying to do. You've really piqued my curiosity. But why are you doing what you're doing? Why is the organization doing what they're doing?
We want to make the world a better place. Essentially, we all see the news. We all see the change in the environment. I mean, I'm sat here baking in Calgary right now for like the 3 weeks in a row of heat wave, which there is variation, but ultimately the trend is going the wrong way. So how do we create that stop? So the Meatless Farm objective is, whether it's 1 or 2 meals a week replaced to plant-based, has a huge impact on the environment. We're not calling for the death of the beef industry like some of the competitors we have. Just a slight reduction is enough to create a tipping balance the other way. And that's just our industry. There's so many other things going on in the world that we can do better. How can we use less energy in the process? How can we use less water? It's not just about the carbon emissions. We got to preserve water. I mean, right now the farms are struggling. There's not been enough rain this year. There's an imbalance somewhere. How do we make less of an impact? I think probably any one of us has a drive somewhere around future generations. And I think it comes back to the leave the world a better place, I think is what we should all be doing. Even if it's just a small change. Some of us, we can create factories and do this. Some people can just eat 1 meatless meal a week to have a reduced impact, drive once less a week, turn the AC down 1 degree, turn the heating down 1 degree. It's all those small changes by 7 billion people make a really big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with you. It's just those small little incremental changes, right, have such a big impact. It just shows too, like you're such a big picture thinker, of how you see the world and what you want to accomplish, and that's fascinating. So looking back and looking forward, and the lessons that you've learned along the way, Chris, paint me a picture of your golden pond. What does the future look like? And you're the sage goose on the pond, and you have a crystal ball, right? And from the things you've learned in the past, where do you see it going in your world, or what do you see from a bigger picture globally?
I think certainly I'd like to see the numbers come true for the plant-based industry, that we have that 10% stake in the ground, because that's a big impact. And it's a thought leader in many spaces. We've got people working across industries on different challenges and how we do better. And ultimately get that better balance, that it becomes just a part of the norm. It just becomes, it doesn't have to be a Meatless Monday tagline. It just goes back to balance. And I think personally for me, my strive is always to try and create balance. You're always on an imbalance point, always moving forward, which creates a new scenario, and then get back to balance. So whether that's sustainable eating, sustainable expenditure, just challenging what we do as a business and what we do as individuals to make sure that we have less impact. And actually that slows life down a little bit and we can enjoy it a bit more. I mean, certainly for me on the acreage, it's now going to be a couple of years of really hard work to get things where we want to be. And as we start to stabilize and put the right systems in place so we can enjoy it a bit more, we can slow down in life a little bit. And I think, as a population, we're all racing to something and we're not quite sure what it is. We're always busy to get somewhere. And then when we get to end of life, it's kind of, maybe I'd have liked to have done things differently and enjoyed things a bit more. So I think that's certainly an exercise I do is, what's my end of life and where do I want to be? And I think if you think at that point, backwards of what do I want to have done, what do I want to have achieved, a lot of things get put into perspective, and you can kind of take a step back.
It's interesting you say that. And, one of the things that's been on my mind recently, and that has been for quite a few years, but it's been a little more top of mind, was, almost the busy has been sort of held as this badge of honor. I'm so busy, I'm so busy, I'm so busy, right? And people, it's almost come to a place of respect that just because you're busy, that means you must be successful. And there's not a lot of truth to that. It's, so when do we, the success is actually taking the time to actually enjoy what's going on and take it all in, right? And then the fruits of your labor, shall we say. And so I think that by saying that, the whole slow down piece and start to enjoy life, right? That to me, there's your sage advice for people.
Yeah, and it's something we try to live by here as well. So I mean, part of the one-to-one conversations with the team here, I always say, if you've got a 40-hour contract, I don't need 40 hours of work. So I think 32 hours, if you achieve the same results, is about the results that we achieve. Mm-hmm. And I would actually rather you say, I'm going to take 6 hours out and I have a project I want to work on. So I mean, this company was born out of me having an idea and going and exploring it. Having the freedom to do that was why we innovated and did something new. So I actually stipulate, I want at least like 5 hours of your working week thinking differently, doing something, challenging yourself, reading just a book on how to do something new, because ultimately that's where the innovation comes. And, if you need flexibility, if you need to go home, if you need to finish a few hours early and do something with the kids because the weather's nice, get out of the office and go do it, because it's going to be different tomorrow.
Yeah, that's fantastic. To like then allow your team to actually do you practicing what you preach.
Yeah.
So my last and final question of the day, Chris, is if you were standing on a mountain and the whole world was intently listening to you, what would you say?
That's a very tough, good question. I think it probably just comes back to the piece that we talked about before. Slow down and just consider what we do. Think about the bigger picture. What would you want to be by the end of your life? Because I think if you put that in perspective, everything else starts to come into focus. If you don't consider the end of life now, at any age, and I think it's a good exercise to do regularly, then you'll get to the end of it and realize you've missed half the things you wanted to do, or you've just wasted time. It's always a good exercise to talk about that deathbed conversation, I think.
It does put things into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah. People always think it's a bit morbid to think about, but I think it's critical to just focus you in and don't waste time on things that don't matter to you. Don't worry about people's opinions. Don't worry about being the odd duck. I think being the odd duck is where it's fun.
Oh, I agree with you. And that was the whole part of that question, right? Is that being that odd duck is what makes you awesome. Being that odd duck is what puts you out in the world and does something differently, right? That way you have your piece to make the world a better place. That's what makes you the odd duck, and celebrate it.
Absolutely.
So, Chris, I want to thank you and for your time, but I also want to let my listeners know number one, where can they find you? So there's that piece there. But I also, we want to do, obviously do a bit of a shameless plug for the Lovingly Made Ingredients, but where can people get your product? Where can they connect with the organization? All those aspects to be able to reach out to you, because, basically because of the fantastic work that you're doing. So I want to make those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the best place right now is our lovinglymadeingredients.com website. We have a contact form in there where we can connect people to whether it's the sales team. So right now we're a B2B sales focused business, but hopefully hitting retail stores with a different product in the next few months. So yeah, that's it's going to be an exciting process. And certainly we've had farmers turn up at the door to talk to us. They want to sell us peas, so that always welcome a good conversation. If anyone just wants to talk sustainability, then I'm open for it. We're doing factory tours now. We've got the province open, so we can always do a little bit of that too.
So the website is just Google Lovingly Made Ingredients, and what's the URL?
It'd be just www.lovinglymadeingredients.com.
Okay, excellent. And where can they find you, Chris? Outside of the website.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty slow to get back to people on there right now, particularly as I'm out clearing a lot of stuff on the acreage.
So you're not out on the farm or the acreage with your phone, responding to LinkedIn. Very
Yeah, if I
wise.
am, I'm stood on a log on one leg trying to get the reception I need.
Okay. See the opportunity to put your phone away, stay focused on what you're doing, and slow down and enjoy the environment.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
See, you're practicing what you preach.
Exactly. And I actually got a typewriter for Father's Day as well to do some slow writing as well. So that's always quite nice.
Really,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
typewriter. Have you
Old school typewriter.
have you used it yet?
Oh yeah, quite regularly.
Wow.
It's quite therapeutic to do. It's a nice timeless classic. I think those some more older technologies are certainly the way to do things.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I love it. Well, there you have it, folks. It was a great time here today with Chris Shields of Lovingly Made Ingredients. This is Warren Barry flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond because we're better together. Thank you ever so much for your time today, Chris.
Yep. No, thanks for having us.